Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Cafe Society was the reason I was trudging through the rain-soaked streets of New York City on a blustery Sunday night. Well, that, and my lawyer, Roger Brownstein. Roger had pulled me out of a few tight spots with the law, so when he asked for a favor, I didn't argue. I owed him. And that's the only reason I agreed to take on a case involving one of those high society ladies with too much money and time on her hands. I stepped into the store club dripping like I'd taken a swim in the Hudson, something I wouldn't recommend. The coat check girl eyed my soaked raincoat and hat with hesitation before taking them. I offered a sheepish shrug. She smiled, bright enough to light up the room. Cute, but girls like her? A dime a dozen, and I was out of change. I asked if she could take care of my coat, and especially my hat. If she could block it before it dried out of shape, I'd be grateful. She said she'd try. Oh, right. Name's Simon Maddox. I'm a private investigator. I handle the kinds of jobs that never make the papers. No cops. No questions. Just clean results and quiet conclusions. I'm good at cleaning up messes without leaving footprints. That's why I was here tonight. Some rich lady needed my help. Probably not for the first time in her life. Hopefully not another divorce case. Those get old fast. Everyone's innocent. Everyone's a victim. No one tells the truth. I flagged down the cigarette girl, handed her $1 for a pack of Lucky Strikes, lit one up, and signaled to the waiter. I asked for Miss Veronica Sykes' table. He pointed me to a quiet corner where a young blonde sat sipping a champagne cocktail like she owned the room. Fife Logan, the singer, had just wrapped her set, so I had no excuse left. I walked over. Miss Sykes, Roger Brownstein said you wanted to speak with me. Something about needing a discreet investigation? She took a drag from her camel, exhaled slowly, then turned toward me. Roger's a good friend, she said coolly, and he assured me you're discreet. That's what I need. I gave her a nod to continue. I've recently met someone. Casually, for now, and before I get involved, I want to know if there's anything in his past that might come back to haunt me. The moment we're seen together, my name will be linked to his. I just want to be sure I'm not making a mistake. That's all. I tried not to hate my new client, but it was a lost cause, especially after Lena. I can do that for you, and I'll be discreet. All I need you to tell me is his name and the places he frequents. She didn't look relieved or even happy. I recognized that look. It was the look of one of the high and mighty having to do something beneath her, having to deal with someone not up to her standards. She rattled off his name, a Raymond Miles, the Lakewood Country Club, and some other places that rich people went to. Veronica slid an envelope over to me. For your expenses, then turned her attention back to the band. I stuffed the envelope into my pocket. I guess I was dismissed. That's okay. The atmosphere was getting a bit stuffy anyway. I had a restless night. No DOS for yours truly. As I made my way down the hall to the bathroom, I heard great speckled bird coming out of the ether. Mrs. O'Grady, my landlady, liked to fix breakfast while being kept company by the likes of Roy Acuff, Bing Crosby, and the Monroe brothers. My morning ablutions done, I popped in to see what the old bird was cooking up. As fast as I had breezed into the kitchen, I double-timed it back out to the dining room, easily avoiding swipes from the broom. You just stay out of my kitchen, Mr. Maddox. I know your mother, and don't think that I won't clue her in on how you are acting. She continued in a milder tone. Just set yourself down, and I'll be bringing your coffee to you. I greeted Joe and Charlie as I took a seat at the dining table. They were fellow boarders in Ma O'Grady's flop. Nobody called it a flop house where she could hear it. I can remember not being welcome at her table for a week after she overheard me calling the place I bunked at a flop. It had taken a while for her to overlook the shame I had heaped upon her and her fine residence. I have to admit she runs a very clean boarding house, and the food is always good. Mrs. O'Grady brought me in a hot cup of coffee and told me that she would bring my breakfast in soon. Knowing my mother and having raised 6 boys of her own, gave her the right to mother me, she said. It didn't matter that I was a 30-year-old, hard-nosed Seamus. She assured me it was her right every time I complained about it. Charlie finished reading the paper, folded it up, and went to work. He was a barber, and what he had read in the paper would provide a source of conversations for the day. Joe had ducked out earlier. Jobs were scarce, and he didn't want to be late and give the foreman an excuse to replace him. As Charlie went out of the house, Mrs. O'Grady carried my breakfast in from the kitchen. There was a bowl of oatmeal with a circular trail of honey on top, a day-old sweet roll, and a couple of apple slices. Eat your oatmeal before it gets cold, and I'll get you another cup of coffee. She placed the breakfast dishes in front of me and scooped up the coffee cup, darting back into the kitchen. The Crosley CR-37 Bluebird radio that we had given her for Christmas was crooning out "Good Night, My Love" when the music was suddenly interrupted. We have some news from Europe. Today, the German government denied accusations that German troops had landed in the Spanish colony of Morocco. The besieged Spanish government had made complaints to the League of Nations, but could not provide proof. As a result, no action was taken. Mrs. O'Grady danced back out of the kitchen and set my coffee in front of me. Hot and black, just like I like it. She started complaining that there was no good news from Europe anymore, grabbed Joe and Charlie's dirty dishes, and took them back in the kitchen to wash them. Myself, I had mixed the honey into the oatmeal and was eating it as fast as I could before it hardened. By the time I was working on the sweet roll, Mrs. O was back to take the empty oatmeal bowl to wash. I swear she never sat down once the whole time I was eating my breakfast. I managed to grab my coat and hat and get out of the house before Mrs. O'Grady could bless me with a kiss on the cheek. Sheesh, I know I have a baby face and remind her of her sons, but there is just so much a man can stand. I decided to spread Miss Sykes' cash around and take a hack to the office. Taxi drivers had families to feed too. The taxi pulled up in front of an old brick building, and I threw 2 checkers at the cabbie and told him to keep the change. The 3 flights of steps provided my morning workout. I checked the door to my office. The hair was still there, and the door was locked. I assumed that nobody had been in there since I locked up. My office was one room with a hot water heater taking up one corner. Actually, I think this used to be the janitor's room. I hung my coat and hat up and went back into the hallway to use the payphone. Ma Belle must have forgotten it was up here because I never saw anyone empty the coin box out. I don't think there was much to empty because the nickel on a string was still tied to the phone. The nickel still worked, so I called my bookie to ask about Raymond Miles. He had been a good source of mob-related info before, so I thought it was worth a try. He asked me to stop in around 2 p.m. for the word. I also called a few of the higher-class hotels to ask if he was staying there. No go. I even called the Lakewood Country Club inquiring if he was a member. The lady I talked to at the country club was brisk at best. I could hear the icicles dripping off her words as she told me that they didn't release membership information over the telephone. I decided to wait in my office for the phone to ring and to thaw out my ear. While I was waiting, I decided to clean my Roscoe. A clean gun is a happy gun, and I wanted my .45 to stay happy. It was surplus from the World War, but it never misfired and packed one hell of a punch. Things shot with a .45 tended to go down and stay down. I didn't usually pack heat. Prohibition was over and the streets were quieter. I usually left my rod at the office, not wanting to upset Mrs. O'Grady. Hell, she blew her wig if someone smoked at the dining table. 3 hours later the horn still hadn't gone off, so I decided to pop over to the coffee shop and grab some lunch. Oh yeah, and some coffee too. I liked the dame that ran the coffee shop. She looked like she was in her 40s, but she had really great gams. I spent some time watching her strut around taking orders, delivering food to the customers, bussing tables, and, of course, pouring refills of coffee. That broad really worked her butt off making sure that the customers had hot food and coffee. I gave her a 5 spot and told her to keep the 10. In return, she gave me a sweet smile that kept me warm until I could flag down a cab. Something about the pool hall that fronted for the bookie joint made me uncomfortable. Maybe it was the pair of goons that picked me up by the elbows and manhandled me to Bernie's office. Yes, you guessed it, Bernie is my bookie. Bernie didn't look very happy to see me. Perhaps it was the shiner on his left eye that happened to be shut. The goons dumped me on the floor, and he read me the riot act. Simon, I appreciate you. You always settle your debts on time, and you're patient when it comes to collecting your winnings. I'm really going to miss doing business with you. But listen, you made a mistake when you asked me to look into someone I have no reason to know anything about, including his name. I know you didn't mean to put me in an awkward position, but hear me out. The advice I'm giving you could save you a lot of trouble. You won't mention that man's name again, and you won't try to find out anything about him. If you do, you'll be making things much harder for yourself. You better back off before things escalate. Trust me. I didn't need to be told twice. I split before Bernie changed his mind. I decided to walk the 8 blocks to police headquarters to clear my head and think. Someone with a lot of juice in the mafia, someone that could get away with tagging Bernie in the blinker. I wondered if I could get some wire from my old pally, Sergeant Bricker. As I walked past the deck sergeant, he made some crack about me still being alive. Normally, I would have fired off a retort like eggs and coffee, but I wasn't in a joking mood. He must have taken my silence personally, because he just glared at me. I made my way to the break room and managed to get Sergeant Bricker's attention. He glanced around to make sure his lieutenant wasn't around. That bull really hated me, and then came over. I know I still owe you, but I was hoping you could get me the lowdown on this guy, Raymond Miles. I explained to him what had occurred when I asked Bernie the same question. This got him interested, and he asked me to wait for him inside near the entrance. I was passing the time when he marched up to me, grabbed me by the collar, and dragged me outside into the cold. I started to protest what he had done when he silenced me with a finger jammed into my face. He spoke in a loud whisper full of disgust. I don't know how you got interested in this guy, but he has friends in high places, and he is off limits. Oh, my lieutenant heard about this and is not happy with yours truly. He also says that if he catches you even thinking about Raymond Miles, He will arrest you and throw away the key. As for me, don't even let me see you on the same street as me." Sergeant Bricker turned on his heel and left me standing like an okie on a subway platform, without a clue. My curiosity up, I was determined to keep on digging, to find an answer to this riddle. Oh yeah, I was going to start carrying my Roscoe too. The night had passed without incident. I had been able to sneak my .45 into the boarding house last night and out again this morning without being found out by Mrs. O'Grady. She was a dear old lady, but she didn't realize the way some things were these days. I had splurged using some of what was left of Miss Sykes' expense money. I had bought a radio for my office. If I'm going to get killed on this case, I might as well go out first rate. I was listening to Tommy Dorsey's lyrical trombone in On Treasure Island, with vocals sung by Edith Wright, when I heard a tentative knock on the door. I turned the radio off and said, "Come in." When she opened the door and came in, I was struck dumb. The first things to enter were her exquisite legs. Clad in black stockings, they shimmered as they moved. The rest of her was aces as well. This babe was a looker, a butter and egg fly. She stood in front of my desk waiting for me to invite her to sit down. I was dizzy with the dame and couldn't make my vocal cords work. I finally croaked out something which she took as an offer of a chair. She was like poetry in motion when she folded her svelte body into the chair and stared at me. When she started to speak, her voice was like honey and I was the bee. I didn't catch what she said at first, and she had to repeat herself. "Mr. Maddox, I need your help. I've gone to the police, but they said they can't help. I'm at wit's end and have nowhere else to turn." It was time for me to speak up, and I didn't want to sound like a know-it-all, so I kept it simple. "Those officers are clueless. They think flashing a badge will make the bad guys back down. Just tell me what's really bothering you, and I'll have your back." She smiled at me, and I thought I was going to melt. My father just passed away and left me a ranch out in Texas. Apparently, the foreman and his Brunos are trying to chisel me out of my rightful inheritance. I need a strong man to represent me and look after my interests there. I'm sure that it would not take more than a couple of months to sort it all out. She gracefully rose out of the chair, dropped a card on my desk, and floated out. God, she had reminded me of Lena. The fine sculpted face, the melodious tones coming from her mouth, the long blonde hair coiffed just right. She had it all. If Lena hadn't raked me over the coals, I would have fallen for her cafe society flim-flam hook, line and sinker. This Raymond Miles would have gotten me out of his hair for at least a couple of months, maybe forever. I took the card with her number on it and threw it in the trash. Nobody plays Simon Maddox. I turned the radio back on in time to hear. Animated by the desire to contribute increasingly, in the interest of the general cause of peace and security, to the betterment of relations between them and between all the Mediterranean powers, and resolved to respect the rights and interests of those powers, Britain and Italy signed a pact to maintain the status quo in the Mediterranean. More dancing in Europe, jostling for position. I wonder what it will finally come to. I had one more trick up my sleeve with Raymond Miles. He was not letting it go, so neither would I. I called a friend over at the gas company. I asked her for the address of one, Raymond Miles. I told her to be very careful. It was open season on friends of Simon Maddox, and I could not afford to lose another friend. She said she would get back to me in a day or two. I was about to turn off the radio and head for home when there was another bulletin. Dr. Jalmar Schacht, German Minister of Economics, was quoted as saying, "There would be no peace in Europe until the German colonial problem was solved. Autarky will necessarily lead to a lowering of the standard of life of the German people. But we have no choice so long as political conditions do not permit German colonial activity. No great nation willingly allows its standard of life and culture to be lowered, and no great nation accepts the risk that it will go hungry." I turned the radio off thinking that Germany was aching for a scrap. I locked the office and took the subway home to enjoy some Balimalo that Mrs. O'Grady had cooked. I went to sleep with a full belly and a clear conscience. The next few days went by without anything happening. I was sure that since I didn't fall for the blonde muffin, then Miles would step up to the plate with his next move in the game. I figured that it would be some torpedoes because the skirt didn't work. So, I waited in my office, with my Roscoe out, and ready to play. The blower sounded off in the hall, and I went to answer it. My friend in the gas company had come across with the goods. I now knew where Miles hung his hat, and I could bring the game to him. All I needed now was a flivver, and I could put Miles on the spot and see where he went. I went down to my local service station where I knew that I could chisel a buddy that owed me a tin can for a few days. I was parked near Miles' house, a snazzy cave that must have cost a carload of lettuce. A black Chrysler Airflow came out of the garage and stopped at the front door. A man and a dame togged to the bricks got in the back of the Airflow, and it headed uptown. I followed at a safe distance until the Airflow stopped outside the Onyx Club. The dame and the hi-hat were admitted into the club. I didn't get a good look at the broad, but I would never forget what Raymond Miles looked like. He was tall with wavy blonde hair. Women probably found him attractive, but I could see the menace in his cold blue eyes. I only saw him for a moment, but his mug was branded into my brain forever. The two men in the front of his flivver, probably hoods, parked the airflow and went into the club to stay warm. Like a twit, I stayed in the car doing an Admiral Byrd impression. After a long, frozen time, hi-hat, and the doll took off in the airflow after his goons had got it all toasty and warm. I was just trying to get the tin can I had borrowed to turn over. I followed the airflow to some house on Park Avenue. The house looked somehow familiar, but I couldn't be sure because of the snow. The dish was dropped off there, and Miles headed back to his cave. I decided that I wouldn't make my report to Miss Sykes until I knew the name of this mystery dame. For the next few days I followed Miles, being careful not to be seen. I needed to get the lowdown on Miles for my client. Just the fact that he was pitching woo with this broad might be enough for Miss Sykes, but I wanted to go the distance for her and put the finger on this dame. I found out she was a blonde, about 5 feet 2 inches tall, wore fur, and was always togged to the bricks. I swapped heaps with the Joe at the service station, so Miles and his hatchet men wouldn't crab to my watching them. This was a step up in the tin can department. Ring-a-ding-ding. It had a radio. Now I could keep up on the news on the ether. In the news today, Germany and Italy rejected the Anglo-French proposal for control of admission of foreign volunteers to fight in Spain. They felt that this would limit the volunteer troops sent to Spain and even force a recall of said troops. All of this peeping on Miles and his babe finally bore fruit. I thought I recognized the sweet patootie that he was parading around town. They had just gone into the Onyx Club. I parked the car and went into the club. John Kirby and his sextet were opening that night, and the place was packed. I did not see Miles or his flame, so I cautiously made my way around the room. I wasn't that careful, though, because I heard a familiar voice say, "Simon, fancy meeting you here. Raymond was just asking about you." I slowly turned around to see that face I knew so well. It was Lena, the sweet twist of the cafe society that had ripped my heart out. I knew the look on her kisser too well. She was now going to stomp on it. I tried to look like everything was cool, but her being with Miles really blew my wig, and not in a good way. Miles just stared at me with his icy blue eyes and a twisted smile on his mug. He had the bulge and he knew it. His voice was like gravel in a cement mixer. "I know you've been spying on me, and I want you to put the kibosh on it, or I will, and you won't enjoy how I do it. If this is because of Lena, get wise. She doesn't want to be with you. She wants to be with me. You are nothing. I could buy you 100 times over and only have to fork over some tin. What do you say to that? I say that you are welcome to her. Watch out, or she'll have you working for her daddy's company. As for watching you, I've got the lowdown that my client needs. On the flip side, you have made me curious, so I think I'll keep my lamps on you. Something is not kosher about you, and I'm going to find out what it is." I thought I'd handled myself well, and I strutted out of that club with my head held high. For a moment I thought about Lena, and that she had bitten off more than she could chew. She was a big girl and knew the score. I knew that she'd come up smelling like a rose, if there was any trouble. I should have been watching out as I went to the car, instead of thinking about Lena, because the next thing I knew my head exploded and I sank into darkness. I awoke with my head throbbing and felt a draft that caused me to shiver. I opened my eyes to find a pip of a nurse giving me a sponge bath. When she realized that I was awake, her face lit up like a traffic signal. The blush on her fair skin made her cute as a bug's ear. She covered me up with a sheet and ran out to get the doctor. He was happy that I was now awake and checked me out. It turns out that I had been out for 3 days, and he wasn't sure that I would ever wake up. The croaker wanted me to flop a couple more days in the hospital before I could go back to Mrs. O'Grady's. The second day, I was awake. A couple of flatfoots from the clubhouse strolled in giving me the 3rd degree. It seems that I was found on the side of 52nd Street with a bashed-in conch. I almost froze to death before a meat wagon brought me here. The bulls tried to crab who had parted my hair with a brick, but I wasn't going to cop to the idea that Miles had rigged it. They were finally chased out by the nurse. Their parting shot was that if I wasn't so hard-boiled, I would have kicked off. They told me to stop sleeping in the street too. Thousands out of work, and those 2 Johns wanted to be comedians. I was finally sprung from the hospital on the 3rd day. I caught a hack over to Mrs. O'Grady's. After a hearty welcome that included being scolded for worrying her, I called my shyster telling him to set up another face-to-face with Miss Sykes. I then sawed wood until dinner time. I felt swell after I put away several helpings of Mrs. O'Grady's bacon and egg pie. My shyster had been on the blower and left me a message. Miss Sykes wanted to meet me in the Manhattan Room at 8 p.m. It was chaos in the Manhattan Room when I strolled in just before 8. The band was playing at full tilt, and the place was packed. I handed off my damp hat and coat to the check attendant. Yes, it was still raining, and waved over the server with the cigarettes. I swapped a token for a pack of Luckies and scanned the crowd for my client. I walked over and took a seat. Once she spotted me, I filled her in on the situation with Miles. "I would take a pass on this one, Miss Sykes. He has a lot of juice with the wrong crowds. If he was just in with the coppers or the mafia, it would be a different tune. But being close with both of them makes him a bad risk. Also, he is pitching woo with Lena Stratton, and you know what that means. He is just a hot potato all around. Nothing you want to soil your rep with. Veronica took a drag from her cig and slid another envelope across the table to me. Thank you, Mr. Maddox. You'll find your payment is more than adequate. I will no longer have need of your services. Then she turned back to the band, and it was like I wasn't there. As I got up to collect my rags from the check girl, I looked in the envelope. 5C notes. It was like I was glomming the broad. I decided to dip my bill, and I headed to the bar. A couple of slugs of hooch later, and I was ready to blow this joint. I made the check girl's night by laying a Lincoln on her. You would have thought I just cured her of TB. She gave me a honey cooler that knocked my socks off. I managed to stagger out the door before she hooked me and caught a cab home to Mrs. O'Grady's. She was one dame that I didn't have to watch out for. I was off the case, but I still had to put the screws on Miles and his mob. I was going to make him regret the day he got tough with me. I was plenty rugged, and he would soon feel the pain. My sleep was not exactly restful. I still had to figure out what to do about Miles. The smart money said to leave him alone, but I hadn't been called smart since Mrs. Rucker's third grade class. I stashed 3 of the C notes in my room for a rainy day. I noticed it was already raining out, so I stashed the other C note in my shoe, just in case. It was the usual oatmeal and day-old bread for breakfast, so I made short work of it and headed out. Before I could reach the door, the ether pronounced another bit of sunshine. Concerned over German activities in Morocco, the French ambassador to Berlin, André-François Poncet, was assured by Chancellor Hitler that Germany had no designs on the territorial integrity of Spain or its possessions. Walking down to the subway platform just reinforced my dislike for January weather. I was climbing the stairs to my office on the 3rd floor when I heard the sound of my radio playing some jazzy tune I had not heard before. Slipping my .45 out of my waistband and chambering around, I crept forward as quietly as I could, expecting the worst. Slamming the door to my office open only made things worse. The door crashed into the back of the office chair, sending its occupant sprawling over my desk and spilling hot coffee everywhere. A cursing police sergeant was trying to get off of the desk and get to his feet. I pulled my Roscoe out of his kidney and helped him up. Hi, Bricker. What brings you out of the clubhouse on such a fine January morning? You didn't just come to brighten my day, did you? Luckily for him, none of the spilled coffee had landed on my radio. Bricker spent the next few seconds sputtering and wiping coffee off his suit. What do you think you're doing, shoving a rod into my side? I should take it for your own good. Can't I even come visit a pally of mine without being assaulted? I cleaned off my chair and sat down. Well, when you break into my office, make yourself at home. Turning on my radio, who should I expect? He didn't respond to me. You need a better lock on your door. Even my 3-year-old niece could pick it. You're going to need all the help you can get going up against Miles. And don't tell me you're not. I know you. Simon Maddox, you're a stubborn guy, and the lieutenant will pull your badge if he finds out you're not letting this go. Now would be a good time to take a break, go to Florida, and relax. I hear you just came into some money, so spend it while you can. He left with one final warning. Don't say I didn't warn you. I'd bet that Bricker knew about my next 2 visitors when he passed them in the hallway. Cops always recognize other investigators. These were government agents, feds. They didn't need to show their badges. I invited them in. There was only one chair, but I figured they'd figure it out. We're here to come to an understanding. You're getting too involved with someone we're interested in. We don't want you messing things up, so back off. Understand? They had me nervous. The agents didn't wait for a reply. They just left the way they came. Their message was clear, and I knew that any mistake would bring the full force of the federal government down on me. Maybe a trip to Florida wasn't such a bad idea. But when I got home that evening, the thought of backing off disappeared completely. The house was quiet when I got there. Dinner wasn't even started, and there was a mess in the kitchen. My mind was trying to make sense of this. I rushed toward the front door to see if the lady next door knew anything about Mrs. O'Grady. Joe and I collided in the doorway. I was picking myself off the ground when Joe blurted out, "She's in the hospital, that's all I know." We ran to catch a hack and were on pins and needles all the way to the hospital. We finally got there, and I tossed a 5 spot at the driver. We rushed into the hospital and asked where Mrs. O'Grady's room was. We were told that she was all right and was ready to go home. She would be right out if we would wait. I wondered what she would say if we said we couldn't wait. Joe and I were going wacky waiting to make sure she was okay. It's not like we didn't trust the nurse. We just wanted to see her for ourselves. After all, she was our landlady. It was only a couple of minutes, but it seemed like hours until Mrs. O'Grady made her appearance. She was moving slower than usual and had her right arm in a sling, but she smiled when she saw us. I hadn't seen Charlie come in, but was glad he had made it. We rushed up to her, but held back when she flinched. You will have to treat me with kid gloves, I'm afraid. I'll get Mrs. Brock to help me with the cooking and things. We told her not to worry about it, and took her home in a cab. When the four of us arrived back at the boarding house, we were pleased to see that Mrs. Brock had cleaned up the mess in the kitchen and had fixed up a hearty pot of chicken soup. Charlie set the table while Joe got the food on the table. I walked Mrs. O'Grady to her seat and made sure she was as comfortable as she could be. We all waited with bated breath for Mama O'Grady to tell her story. I was just washing some dishes when I heard a knock at the door. It was two men, and they were respectably dressed. Imagine my surprise when they forced their way in. They closed the front door and tried to lean on me. They said that unless Mr. Maddox kept out of other people's business, bad things would happen. Bad things like me falling on the ice and breaking my leg, or the house catching fire in the middle of the night. They were trying to scare me, but the O'Grady clan is made of stouter stuff than that. I'll tell you. I managed to get into the kitchen and grab my broom, and I laid into them like nobody's business. I was yelling and shouting while I thumped them. They made tracks when Mrs. Brock came over to see what the blow-up was about. I guess I taught them not to bust in here and threaten people. You shred it wheat. I was proud of Mama O'Grady, and I wanted her to know that. If you were all that rugged, then what happened to your arm? The tough old bird had the grace to blush. Well, the doctor said I must have sprained it when I was thumping those hoods. We all had a good laugh about that, and then turned in. It had been an eventful day. Later, I lay awake thinking of what happened. It took some moxie to brace Mrs. O'Grady on a Sunday. Those thugs were not going to take this lying down. Mrs. O'Grady was lucky. First thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to get a right G to be here during the day to look out for Mama O'Grady. It was time to take the fight to them. The next morning, another dreary January day, I gave my pal Stuart a Dilliably. He was Jake with looking after Mrs. O'Grady and couldn't believe that Miles' mob was dumb enough to try to put the screws on Mama O'Grady. After that, I started to try and cook my own breakfast. Big Brody on my part. I was lucky that Mrs. O'Grady only had one good arm. Otherwise, she would have knocked me off in no time. Lucky for me, Mrs. Brock came in then and broke it up. I was all jingle-brained from being swatted with the broom, so I took a seat while the ladies fixed breakfast. The United States is instructing the American Consul General at Barcelona to discourage American volunteers. The enlistment of American citizens in either of the opposing forces in Spain is unpatriotically inconsistent with the American government's policy of the most scrupulous non-intervention in Spanish internal affairs. This commentator wonders if this will be a blow to the American citizens already serving in the international brigades. Mrs. O'Grady went into a thither when she heard this and had to be helped into a chair by Mrs. Brock. What am I going to do, Simon? Thomas, my youngest, is serving in the Abraham Lincoln Battalion. Oh, Mr. Maddox, I am so worried about him. It was hard to reassure her about events that were so far away and so volatile. I know the leader of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion, by reputation, and I believe that Tom is in good hands. Also, the radio said that they would only discourage Americans wanting to join. They were not forbidding them to fight for loyalist Spain. It was then that I decided that fascism would be the ruin of all of us if left unchecked, and that I would fight it to my last breath. If you are wondering, I forgave Mama O'Grady for using my given name. I knew she was under a lot of pressure. A knock on the door announced the arrival of my pal Stuart. He would keep Mama O'Grady safe while I tangled with Miles. He was younger than I was, and even more of a baby face, so I knew that he would fit right in. She could not be in safer hands either, except for mine, but there was some disagreement on Stuart's part about that. I went to my office to do some planning and find out something about the neighborhood where Miles lived. After using the blower and my perpetual nickel, I finally got the load down that would let me get the slant on Miles. Once I had that, I could tip his mitt. The family that lived in the mansion across the street from his joint was away for the winter. There was only one catch. I had to convince my snitch that I would not glom or jam up the house. He said his cousin was the cunny boy for the Cosgroves there, and he didn't want to cause him any fraudy issues. I kind of understood his jive and told him that everything would be Jake. Watching Miles could take a while, so I asked Stuart if he could take care of Mrs. O'Grady around the clock for a few days. He would, and I thanked him. I waited at my office until it was dim. Then I took a hack to get in the neighborhood and snuck in the back of the Cosgrove house. It was made to order. I had brought my bins with me. I needed to finger whoever showed up there. Another stakeout, alone, as usual. At least this place had the comforts of home. The first 2 nights were a wash, but the third night made up for it. A chauffeur-driven Mercedes pulled up to the front of Miles' house. A well-dressed, distinguished-looking man stepped out. He looked familiar, though I couldn't place him right away, not in person, maybe from the papers. Then it clicked. Raymond Miles' visitor was none other than Fritz Kund, a high-ranking official from a controversial political group. That explained a lot to me. The lowdown was much clearer with Kund in the picture. That was why the G-men had an interest in Miles. That's why Veronica Sykes should steer clear of him. Then Lena came to mind. I thought that I should warn her. I realized that I didn't know how involved she was with Miles. Also, warning her would probably tip him off. Kun left around midnight, and there was no other action that night. I decided to go back to the boarding house to sleep. I needed to come up with a plan of action. Coming in the front door without knocking had caused Stuart to look around the corner to see who it was. The crumb was wearing an apron. It looked like he was helping Mrs. O'Grady in the kitchen. How would I ever be able to measure up? What a crumb. I couldn't put it off any longer. I had to let my landlady know that I had returned. The radio was on, playing a tune by Cab Calloway. I looked into the kitchen and saw Mrs. O'Grady. She was still wearing her sling and was not using her right arm. I was just about to ask how she was when a news broadcast interrupted the song. The French Minister for Colonies said German agitation for colonies varied with requirements of Hitler's general European policy. He said, if the government of the Reich so wished, it would have been able to procure for itself everything necessary to feed its people. It sounds like those Germans and French are fighting over food. Us Americans never fought over food. Even when the breadbasket of America turned into dust and blew away, we helped each other, we didn't fight our neighbors. We can't let them drag us into their problems. They already have my Tom. Tears appeared in her eyes, but behind the tears there was strength, a strength that had helped her to stand by her husband and raise 3 strong sons. The smell of colcannon brought me out of a much-needed DOS. After my ablutions, I made an appearance downstairs. Stuart was helping Mama O'Grady in the kitchen again. She had lost the sling, but he was doing all the heavy lifting. I was just in time for dinner. I complimented Mrs. O'Grady on dinner, to which she replied that she couldn't have done it without Stuart's help. I was never going to live this down. Joe and Charlie just laughed. It was time to get serious. Mama, it is going to get dangerous around here. I think it's time you visited your sister in Jersey. She started to protest, but I would not hear of it. Miles is thick with those fascists. He had Fritz Kund over to his house last night, and that's the crop. I plan to tighten the screws on Miles, and I want you safe. I don't want him to be able to put the snatch on you. It's either stay with your sister, or I'm going to put you on the Rattler to Florida. Mrs. O'Grady looked to Stuart for support, but he just nodded his conch, agreeing with me. She gave a sigh and went to pack her keys to her. I flagged down a hack and gave him enough cabbage to get her to her sister's. Once Mrs. O'Grady was safely away, I decided to return to keeping an eye on Miles. I wanted to tag along when he pulled a Brody. I was going to gum up the works when he tried anything that wasn't kosher. The view from the Cosgrove house showed me that Miles was getting ready to go out. The 2 goons had already gone to get the airflow. He stepped out of the front door and waited under cover of the eaves to stay out of the rain. Yes, it was still raining. He got into the black tin can, and it drove off. I needed some more to go on, and I thought now was a great time to break into Miles' cave. I went out the back and walked around until I could check out the area. It was after 10 p.m., so I thought the servants, if any, would be asleep. I slipped into the bushes beside one of the front windows. I looked for anyone moving in the house. The window was locked. Figuring it was safe, I used some of the knowledge that I had learned while hanging with the bad kids when I was young. My pocket knife made a little nudge under the sill, and the window was unlocked. I still had that ill-gained knowledge and knew how to use it. All those days of playing hooky were not wasted. I carefully slid open the window, trying to make as little noise as possible. Once it was open, I stepped inside, removing one shoe and then the other. I placed them on the radiator to dry. No sense in leaving wet footprints behind. After quietly closing the window, I began looking around for the library. The door to the library was not locked, and I opened the door. I did not want to turn on the lights, so I used a flashlight. I searched the desk and table looking for a clue that would reveal something about Miles and why he was meeting with Kund. Was it some fascist plot against America, or was it just an innocent thing? Now was the time to see plots everywhere. Maybe I was just upset because he was making time with Lena. In any case, I didn't find any secret plans or pictures of Chancellor Hitler. The kitchen was next, also clean. I didn't want to open a door and wake up a servant, so I was going to leave and call it a day. I was passing the door to the cellar when I heard a noise. I slowly opened the door. Luckily, it was well oiled and didn't squeak. I went down a step at a time and listened for another noise. The sharp crack of a whip and a muffled whimper was heard. I pulled out my Roscoe and continued down the stairs. What I saw really burned me up. A white woman was chained to the wall with the top half of her dress pulled down to her waist. She was facing the wall, and I could see some red welts on her back. Her long brown hair was tucked over her shoulder to leave her skin clear for the whipping. A young man was standing behind her brandishing a whip. He was yelling at her between strikes. "You cower before me. It is the way it should be. Soon your kind will all cower before us, the master race. You are all alike. You try to use your wiles to take control of all the wealth and control our destinies." His voice lowered to a hateful whisper as he continued. "We shall never fall for your wicked, Jewish ways. True Aryan sons will not be fooled. All of you 304s shall be marked as unclean. You think this is pain? Just wait until you are branded. None will lie with you once they see the brand on your cheek and your foul bosom. I had not heard this kind of hatred since I was in the South. And this dame was white too. Not that I thought that darkies should be branded and whipped. They were people too. I had heard enough of this greaseball's bushwash. He looked like he was going to start whipping the dame again, so I stepped up and boffed him in the conch. He must have made me angry because I boffed him too hard. I cooled him. It looked like the master race was not any different from any other hood, a bunch of lightweights. I tucked my Roscoe back in my waistband and went to the doll chained to the wall. She was trembling. She jumped as I touched her shoulder. Don't worry, we're going to take a powder. That Jasper won't hit you anymore. The dame finally turned her head to look at me. She was a looker. She started to thank me, and then her peepers got real big. Whatever I got sapped with must have been big, 'cause I saw stars then nothing. The pounding in my conch was all my brain could concentrate on. Boom, boom, boom. It felt like someone had cut the back of my head off and a skin tickler was trying to bash a bass drumstick through to my eyes, and he was almost through. Things became a little clearer when somebody threw a bucket of water on me and pried my eyelids open. Clearer, but still very painful. My arms were held over my head, and I was facing a wall. My head was turned to the left, and I could see the Jinchi babe still chained to the wall. Her upper body was still bare, but I wasn't in the mood to enjoy the scenery. The number that was prying my eyelids open would let go, and I would close my eyes. He would then slap my mug hard and pry open my lids again. I don't know how long this went on, but I finally got the idea that I had to keep my eyes open. Once my eyes focused, I could see who was slapping me. It was a broad. Not just a broad, but a skag. I could tell that she was all burnt up about something. Maybe because she was a skag, I wasn't thinking too well. I then heard a voice. Hello, Mr. Maddox. You were warned, but you just couldn't let it go. It was Miles. You were done with the job for Miss Sykes, and were paid very well, but you got curious. Your curiosity led you to be chained up to a wall in my basement. You have heard the saying, curiosity killed the cat? Well, your curiosity has certainly killed you. You can have one bit of satisfaction. Because of you I have to go undercover, abandoning this house. Last time, I tried to kill you by freezing you to death. I'm going to go the other way here and burn you to death. Don't worry, it's really not my house. I have to go now. I'm leaving Miss Goldman to keep you company. No one should ever have to die alone. I heard his footsteps moving away and then climbing the stairs. The skag had some final words for me too. You think you are so tough, killing a poor boy like Klaus. Make sure you say hi for me when you meet him in hell. She then spit in my face and left. I could hear and smell the goons splashing kerosene all over the cellar. Then they were done, set the kerosene on fire and left. It was getting hot down here and the smoke was thick. I heard the babe whimper and I knew she was awake. I could lean down close enough to kiss her. She was giving me a honey cooler as the flames got closer. Our lips were pressed hard together as we tried to shut out the reality of what was happening. I felt her lips go limp as she passed out. I moved my head back so I could gaze upon her angelic face. Drops of sweat rolled down her alabaster skin. Her beauty was framed by a mass of fire, but she looked indestructible. I felt myself slipping into darkness. I would reach the next world in the company of this beautiful woman. What a way to go. The sun shining through a window woke me from sleep. I felt like I had just been lost in a desert for a long time. My body hurt and my throat was parched. This obviously was not the afterlife. A cheery voice confirmed that fact. Oh good, you're awake. Your landlady, Mrs. O'Grady, will be so relieved. You know she has been in here every day. I spoke with her, and she didn't know what you were doing in that abandoned old house. Are you thirsty? Let me give you some water. Drink it slowly so you don't choke. The nurse, yes it was the same brunette babe from the last time I was here, gave me sips from a paper cup, slowly, almost teasing me. I was so thirsty that I wanted to grab the cup out of her hand. That's when I noticed that my arms were restrained. I tried to pull against the restraints, but my arms were too weak. She noticed that I tried to move my arms and scolded me. Don't pull against the restraints. You will only injure yourself. Your wrists have been severely burned. How did you get those circular burns around your wrists anyway? I did not satisfy her curiosity. I did not need the nurses bumping gums with my story all over the hospital. I had a sudden thought about Miss Goldman. Was she alive? If so, was she badly burned? I decided to ask without giving anything away. Was there anyone else in the house when it burned down? I mean, were there any other survivors? In an abandoned house. Why would someone be in an abandoned house? Only a bum would be in an abandoned house. No, you were the only one in the house. Speaking of which, why were you in that house? I just closed my eyes and pretended to sleep, but my mind was racing. What happened to the scantily clad beauty I was chained next to? Did she live? Why was I alive? What happened to Miles? I was full of questions without any answers. I don't know if I then fell asleep or passed out. Either way, I was not awake and aware. I was trapped in the burning basement. I could not move my arms, and the bracelets were burning my wrists. I looked up above me. The floor there was burning and started to fall. I was about to be buried in flaming wood. My yell echoed through the hospital room. My eyes popped open as the nurse rushed into the room. She came up to my bed and took my pulse, which was racing. I had a nightmare. I was trapped in the basement of a burning building, and I couldn't move. The floor above was on fire, and it collapsed on me. That is when I woke up and yelled. Did the firemen find me in a basement? I could swear I was in a basement. The nurse leaned close to me, putting her hand on my forehead. Her hand was cool on my fevered brow. You were found on the ground in front of the burning house by the firemen. You had strange circular burn miles around your wrists. You breathed in some smoke, which is to be expected in a fire. You were restrained to protect the burns on your wrists, which will heal, but you will always have scars. Now rest. You need lots of sleep to heal. Who had pulled me from the burning building? What happened to the girl? I was driving myself nutty with these questions. I let myself fall asleep again. The first day back at the office was not real for me. The payphone was still in the hall. The office was still dusty. Everything was still the same, but I could only think of one thing. A dame that I had kissed once, that I had never even really met, whose first name was not known to me, was always in my thoughts. While still in the hospital, I had found out from the firemen that the rain that had fallen for days and days, that was causing flooding of the Ohio River, had kept the house from burning faster, which allowed me to get out. I had agreed with the man and told him that I didn't remember what had happened. I noticed that no coppers came to grill me. I was sure that the G-men would want to find out what I knew, but they never showed. I wasn't really in the mood to listen to music, but I had the radio on anyway. It was just something to pass the time, really. I no longer had a reason for living or to do anything. Not depressed enough, the ether had to add to my misery. The Ohio River flooded, affecting the states of Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky. Thousands of WPA personnel were involved in fighting the Great Flood. The Ohio River crested on January 24th in Evanston, Indiana, and on the 27th at Louisville, Kentucky. The National Weather Service has credited the flooding in the most part to the large amount of continuous rainfall in the Ohio Valley. The WPA people are now doing the cleanup after the worst flood ever recorded. There is no idea of when it will be done. And here I had been complaining about the rain we had. That brought me up short and helped me to stop feeling sorry for myself. Time to get back to work. I'm sure some frustrated wife needs me to get some evidence on her cheating husband. Chancellor Hitler demanded return of German colonies, announced end of reparations provisions for the management of the Reichsbank and German railways as non-governmental concerns, and repudiated the war guilt clause of the Versailles Treaty. Said Germany was ready to guarantee the inviolability and neutrality of Belgium and the Netherlands. Chancellor Hitler vowed, "Peace is our dearest treasure." January of 1937 was over. There was still news of the trouble in Europe on the radio. They were still cleaning up after the Great Flood of 37. Even more devastating than the flood of 1884 or 1913, and Mrs. O'Grady was still worried about her son Tom. She had moved back into her house and took care of us. In the beginning of February, I got a new purpose in my life when I saw Raymond Miles in his car waiting for a traffic signal. It wasn't his airflow. This one really was a flivver. A 28 Model A that had seen better days. How could I follow him? I didn't have my own tin can just waiting by the side of the road, and I didn't see an empty hack either. I saw the answer to my problems coming up the street. It wasn't Silver to the rescue, just an old, gray mare pulling a trolley, but the trolley would do. Especially considering the rush hour traffic, Mr. Miles was not about to speed out of sight. I was keeping an eye on Miles when the trolley stopped and the conductor called for all off. His run was done, and it was time to put Mabel to bed. I got off with the others, unsure of what to do. Miles' flivver was headed toward Long Island and picking up speed due to less traffic. I had to move fast before I lost him. I did not have enough jack for a taxi to Long Island. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went over to Mabel and took the traces off. The conductor either didn't notice me or he thought I was just petting her. I mean, who would think I was going to glom a trolley nag in New York City? No one would, and that's why I got away with it. Stealing the horse and being able to ride it were two different things. Mabel knew that she had come to the end of her job for the day, and she was looking forward to a good rub-down and some oats. She did not expect some stranger to unhook her from the trolley, jump onto her back, and urge her to run with his heels drumming into her sides. Mabel had never been ridden in her life. She was a draft horse. Also, she was used to slow and steady. As a result, she bolted and tried to get me off her back. Ever try to get an animal to do something and have it do too much? When Mabel bolted, I almost fell off. There was no saddle, stirrups, or even reins. I was at the mercy of this gentle giant I had rudely awakened. All I could do was hang on to her neck for dear life. Actually, It was probably good that Mabel bolted. I could hear the conductor cursing and screaming at me to bring his horse back. Mabel realized that she was tired and slowed to a trot. It was easier to stay on, but my backside was paying the price. I tried to steer Mabel, and it somewhat worked, I guess. Hey, I wasn't the Lone Ranger. I didn't know what the horse was thinking. Miles' car was still in sight, and I wasn't getting too close. It would be hard to be on the sly riding a horse. I didn't want Miles or his mob fingering me. We finally got out of the city, and Mabel tried to stop and eat some grass. That was all I needed, riding a bent horse and losing Miles because the horse was hungry. I could tell that Mabel was getting tired. Luckily for me and her, Miles' Model A turned off the main road. The car had turned onto a well-maintained gravel road. I kept Mabel back as well as I could. Basically, that meant not urging her on. The Model A soon went past a sign that read, Camp Siegfried, and some other words in German. I did not read or speak German, but everyone in the world knew the name Hitler. Mabel was adamant. She was not moving from this spot. I decided it was time to continue on foot. Actually, I didn't blame Mabel for not wanting to go in there. The place was spooky. I groaned as I got off of Mabel. I may never sit down comfortably again. I had used muscles that I didn't even know I had. Miles Ford drove a lot slower here, but I had to shake a leg to pipe it. This place was supposed to be a summer camp, but when I saw the street sign that read, Adolf Hitler Street, I knew that this wasn't like any summer camp I had heard of. Did they sneak part of fascist Germany onto Long Island while I was asleep? While everyone had been asleep. I hadn't been paying too much attention to the news on the ether. That was Europe and not our problem. I mean, I only followed the news from Spain, because Mrs. O'Grady's son Tom was in the army there. I suddenly thought I should be more concerned about Germany than I thought. Shaking the thoughts bouncing around my conch, I trailed the Ford. I tried not to breathe too hard, so the steamy clouds wouldn't finger me. The car stopped at a gin joint, and everyone went in. They were all bundled up against the cold, Miles and Lena wearing fur coats and the two hoods just in work clothes. I carefully made my way up to the building, hoping I could hear something. The radio was playing in the background. This Justin, German Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels, said bilateral pacts were better for peace than obscure collective ideas to banish all enmities which exist between us and others. The radio was then turned off. Miles raised his stein of beer and called for a salute to Chancellor Hitler. I eased up so I could see what was happening. Miles was sitting at a table barbering with Kund and someone I didn't have the goods on. He was wearing an apron, so he might be the cook or the restaurant owner. There was a lot of lettuce on the table, and it was moving from Miles to the other two Joes. Everyone appeared to be happy, except for Lena. She looked moody, like she wasn't comfortable about something. Once the jack was all put away, Miles offered another toast. Lena seemed to be drinking corn, and she was drinking it fast too. She seemed to be turning into a real booze hound. Miles was leaning on her hard for her to do something. He was snapping a cap. Do it. Do it. Show my friends what you've got, babe. Lena got to her feet and slipped the fur coat off his shoulders. Everyone's jaw dropped in amazement, except Miles's, he had known. Lena was wearing a black outfit with a swastika embroidered over the front. Below it, she wore a matching garter belt that held up her black silk stockings. Her attire was completed with a pair of 4 heels. The men with Miles were visibly shocked and began cheering. Lena moved with confidence, swaying her body as she walked. She had really transformed. I couldn't bear to watch any further. I didn't want to see how much she had changed. Slipping away from the dump, I made a clean sneak back to where I had left Mabel. She was just standing there like she was waiting for someone to get her out of the cold. I climbed back on Mabel. I was far past trying to jump, and I headed her towards home. It turns out we didn't have far to go. A squad car stopped us before we had gone far. Mabel got taken home in a police horse trailer, and I spent the night in the Huskow. At least it was warm. The cot in the Yafang town jail must have been from the Great War, but must have some lumps added by the coppers. I was woken up early by a tin cup being raked across the bars. I groaned and rolled over. Wake up, jailbirds, you've got a chance to take on some grub before you meet the judge. The gruel that they served would not have been accepted in any soup kitchen. I let it cool and harden in the bowl. I gave it back to the guard who came to take me to see the judge. He was going to put the bracelets on me, but saw my scars and decided against it. Well, you are only a horsegonif anyway. The deputy led me out of the jail and across a courtyard. I was placed in a hallway to wait. The Honorable Judge Noyce sounded like a right G. I was sure if I explained myself to him that I would be sprung. Also, it was a Friday. I didn't think that the judge would want the town to have to dish out the dough to pay for an extra John to run the jail. Boy, was I wrong. The deputy led me in. When asked if I was guilty or not, I said, I plead guilty, with special circumstances. That got the judge's attention and he asked me to explain. I told him the story of Raymond Miles up to that point. When I told him about the fire, he had me show him my wrists. I thought that the judge believed my story. It was true. What I didn't know was that this judge was a true American, trying to fight fascism, and he thought that stealing the horse was a prank and that I knew his history and was lying to him to get off. When I was done, the judge said, "I have listened to the story you told very carefully. I think you went on a drunken binge and tried to get out of it by taking advantage of me in this court. I find you guilty of chicanery and theft of municipal property. You should be glad that we are not in Texas. The penalty would be far worse. I sentence you to a fine of $50 or 30 days in jail. Either pay the clerk or have a good month in jail." Court dismissed. Not having any jack, except for some tin, I went back to the caboose. I was just in time for lunch. I was given 2 peanut butter sandwiches on day-old bread. Those sandwiches were really dry. I kept yelling at the guard for water. He finally brought me a tin cup, half full of brackish water. I took it and drained the cup. I handed it back to him and said, "Fresh water this time," and fill the cup up. The deputy took back the cup and replied, "You know, ever since the sheriff came up with this new menu, we don't get many hobos getting arrested anymore. And you only get half a cup of water for each meal. That's the crop. Look, I don't have the scratch to pay the fine. I am not trying to just get some free grub." The deputy walked off shaking his head. I figured that I would be in stir for a month. I hoped with the food they were going to feed me didn't pop me. I decided not to chew the other sandwich. The next 30 days were both boring and very interesting. Deputy Earl Sawyer turned out to be a very good companion to a kept G, namely myself. He was a strange character. While he did bring in his radio, he didn't want to miss the Lone Ranger, and we had a lot of interesting chins. He didn't relax the sheriff's restrictions on the prisoner menu, although the water was fresher. He is a right egg. He treats me well, but does not shirk his duties. He even let me take the extra lumps out of the cod if I put them back before I left. Early while I was in stir, I persuaded Deputy Sawyer to place a call on the blower to Mrs. O'Grady. I didn't want her to fret over my absence. During the 30 days, in between episodes of The Lone Ranger, Jack Oakey's College, and the Lux Radio Theater, we also heard some news broadcasts. Deputy Sawyer and I palavered about the events in Europe and here in the States. The Netherlands informed Germany the latter's guarantee of neutrality of January 30th was unacceptable. Non-intervention committee ban on foreign volunteers in Spain became effective. I wonder what Mama O'Grady thought of that. Portugal consented to let British supervise her land frontiers. Chancellor Hitler promised to respect the integrity and neutrality of Switzerland. He is quoted in saying, "The existence of Switzerland answers a European need." Lord Halifax said Britain was interested in the fate of Central and Eastern Europe, but was unable to define beforehand its attitude in hypothetical cases. It sounded to me that Europe was just waiting for someone to blink. All I knew was I was going home to Mama O'Grady's cooking. I was so tired of peanut butter. Deputy Sawyer said he would give me a ride home. He also warned not to elbow into the FBI's hunting grounds. I knew what he meant by that, so I asked him who had delivered the warning. His reply was that it was a tall looker of a brunette with an FBI buzzer. That really started me to thinking. Mama O'Grady only pasted me once on the arm when she met me at the front door after I had knocked. She told me not to scare her like that anymore. "I'll be careful, Mama O'Grady." I was in the Huskow, Mama. The only things that could have happened were food poisoning or a pulled muscle. I laughed at myself, realizing how true that actually was. "I don't care, Mr. Maddox. I will not stand for you to get hurt." She hugged me and pulled me into the boarding house. "When you were gone, I got a letter from Tom. He is doing as well as can be expected. Now with the ruling against letting new volunteers in, I am worried about Tom again. I am an old woman. I shouldn't have all these worries at my age." I reassured her, "Tom will be all right. You taught him well. I'm sure he'll keep his head down. You know what I've missed these past 30 days? Your coffee and your wonderful cooking. Would you please get me a cup?" Mrs. O'Grady sped into the kitchen and returned with a cup and put Tom's letter into my mitt. I took a sip and started to read his letter. "Mom, I am fine and keeping my head down. I'm here doing something important, Mom. I know that I'm not a communist, but someone has to help the people of Spain. They freely elected a new government, democratically. But some bad hoods have tried to steal the power from the people. Not only that, they've got some evil men helping them. I mean Hitler and Mussolini. That's why I went to Spain, Mom, to help these poor people win this battle. Then one day it would be easier for you and the mothers of the future. Don't let anyone mislead you by telling you that all this has something to do with communism. The only thing the communists did here was show the people how to fight and try to win what is rightfully theirs. And they're not bad people, Mom, certainly better than the fascists. Take care, Mom, and pray for me. Your loving son, Thomas." I enjoyed reading Tom's letter. "Mama O'Grady, you should be very proud of your son." I gave her a wink. I never really thought that Tom was a communist. She pasted another one on me and then smiled. I realized yet again that I was a lucky Joe, far luckier than I deserved. That made me think of Miss Goldman and the fact that she may have survived the fire. The only thing was if she was alive, then she was a G-man. My stomach now feeling better than it had since I was arrested. I decided to check on the office. I grabbed $200 from my stash and caught the subway. I didn't want to accidentally run into that conductor I had glommed Mabel from. That gink might bear a grudge and try to knock me off. The office hadn't changed in a month. The area was so run down that the dust wouldn't even get together. I turned the radio on for company, and I tried to sort out the last 2 months. The G-men were keeping track of me. That was no bunk. They must have been. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been wise to the fact that I was in stir in Yafank and wouldn't have sent that skirt with a buzzer to warn me off. That brunette skirt with a buzzer. I didn't know why it was, but I was dizzy for Miss Goldman. That is if she was still alive. What about good old Mr. Miles? I already knew he had an interest in American fascists. Why did he keep going to the Onyx Club? Did he have a snitch in Tin Pan Alley? Or maybe a butter and egg man? These were the things I had to get the lowdown on. They would allow me to put the squeeze on Miles. I owed him bad. I was no longer on the nut. I decided that I would bring the fight to Miles and his gang. France withdrew restrictions on gold deliveries. A French government official is quoted as saying, "The lengthy economic crisis has caused a certain amount of demoralization. France is living in a state of closed economy, almost autarky." The same official also said, "To attain normal prices, we must balance supply and demand, wages and prices. Everything will be useless if the national economy receives fresh shocks. Therefore, we pause." Even the French were saying that they were in trouble. Now is not the time, and Europe is not the place to be crying poor. I grew worried about the state of Europe and Mrs. O'Grady's son Tom. I shook my conch, telling myself not to cause myself any more problems than what I already had. I had lost my Roscoe in the fire, so I went to my backup. I was in the middle of cleaning my rod when there was a knock on the door. I always had people want to come in when I was busy. I was past coming across as a right G, so I would let them see what it was really like being a PI. I shouted, "Come in, it's open." I was wiping the grease out of the barrel, so I didn't see her enter. I heard her sit down, and then my yap dropped open as I heard those melodious tones. "I see you lost your .45 in a fire?" My head popped up, and I gazed into those beautiful brown peepers that I thought I would never see again. There Miss Goldman was sitting in front of me and looking cute as a bug's ear. She had a mischievous grin on her puss, waiting for me to say something. Of course, being the sophisticated hep cat that I am, my first words were, "B, but you're dead, Miss Goldman. I saw you, chained up to that wall. I saw you pass out. Nobody could have survived those flames." I'll admit that here I was being a little goofy. Nobody could have survived, Simon. I passed out. Well, you passed out too. I look pretty good for being dead, don't I? Chained to the wall. You were as well, Simon. She rolled up her sleeves until I could see her scars, just like mine. Only they looked dainty on her wrists. "Since we are members of the same club, won't you call me Samantha, Simon?" Her puss smiled again, teasingly this time. "Okay, I give. We must have got out, Samantha. But how?" "The firemen said they found me on the grass, and they didn't say anything about you." "Come on, spill it. How did we get out?" "The FBI, my fellow G-men, rescued us. They were staking out Miles, but didn't know that I was in trouble. By the way, thanks for giving Klaus the kiss off. A few more hits would have left scars." She paused while she remembered where she was, then continued. "When the agents watching the house saw the fire, they broke in and rescued us. They left you on the front lawn knowing that the firemen would take care of you. Me, they whisked away to a hospital outside the city. I was registered as a Jane Doe burn victim." "Oh, I'm glad that you're okay and don't have any permanent scars." Then I remember the scars on our wrists. I held up my arms, "Except for these, haha. It would have been criminal to leave scars on your beautiful back." Samantha blushed, to which I replied, "What can I say? It's true. No bunk. You are a very beautiful woman, Samantha. But that doesn't tell me why you are here." Samantha stared into his eyes, not blinking. "You are correct. The FBI tried several times to warn you off. It didn't work. After you caused Miles to take the bounce from his joint, it shook him up and threw his game off. The FBI decided that if you wouldn't stop, they would use you to help them. It will mean that you have less choice on what you can do, but you will get help from the government, dough, a tin can, the lowdown, a kind word with local coppers. You can get just about anything but a buzzer." We both laughed when she said that. "Best of all, you get me as a partner." "What do you say?" I answered her with a smile. "I like it. I have one question for you. Do you want to go dancing at the Onyx Club tonight? I'm sure that somebody will be very surprised when you show up on my arm." Mrs. O'Grady was surprised when I came home early, in such a good mood. She smiled and cried when I told her that Samantha was alive, going to be my partner, and that she was going to pick me up in a car the FBI was going to supply. I told her about our going dancing tonight. I'm afraid I let the good news get the better of me. I grabbed Mama O'Grady, lifted her up, and spun around a few times. Of course, when I let her down, I had to run to my room to avoid being hit with the kitchen broom. Mrs. O'Grady's arm had healed well, and she was in fine form as she chased me up to the safety of my room. I had just the suit to wear tonight, so that I didn't embarrass Samantha. It was the suit I wore to funerals and weddings. When I came downstairs, Mrs. O'Grady was impressed, and she told me so. "Simon, you look sharp. You should dress up more often. Whoever this Samantha is, she is a good influence on you. Will I get to meet her when she comes?" I let her wonder for a bit before I said, "Yes, of course, Mama O'Grady. I'm proud to have a friend and landlady like you. I am so blessed to be rooming here." She made a move to go and grab the broom, which I did deserve. I stopped her by saying, "Mama, I'm in my good clothes." She sighed and shook her finger at me. I knew that she wouldn't forget, and the next time I was not wearing my good suit, I would get the broom. We were interrupted by a car pulling up and a knock on the door. When I saw Samantha, my jaw must have dropped. She was wearing her glad rags, and then some. Samantha was dressed up the nines. She had on a black, sleeveless dress that plunged in the back and hung to her curvaceous form so well. She had on black gloves that covered up to her lower forearm, thus hiding her scars from the metal rings. Her outfit topped it off with black silk stockings and high heels. I was so impressed by Samantha's beauty and style that I almost forgot to invite her in. Mrs. O'Grady, clearing her throat, brought me back to reality. I must have blushed because she smiled when I invited Samantha inside. Mrs. O'Grady was grinning widely when I introduced Samantha to her. I'm not sure if it was because I almost forgot to invite her in or if she was genuinely happy for me. I knew she would stay up late just to hear how the evening went. After saying our goodbyes, Samantha and I headed to my new car, an Auburn 1931 convertible cabriolet. The car suited my style perfectly, and I nearly embraced Samantha when I saw it. But I stopped myself just in time. I didn't want to ruin her dress. Opening her door with a bow caused her to smile and curtsy before she got in. "Are you packing?" she asked. I showed her the .38 I had tucked into my waistband. I raised my eyebrows asking her the same question. She tugged at her left glove, which flared at the end. She held her left arm down and showed me the .22 automatic held there. "That's good, my little gangster mall. Just keep your peepers open. We don't know what we're walking into." I parked the car on the street a few blocks from the Onyx Club. Normally, I would have dropped her off and then parked the car, but to be safe, we had to stay together. The weather was getting colder, and we were cold by the time we arrived there. Once inside, we dropped our floggers off with the coat check girl. It was not the girl I had gotten the kiss from, so I was not uncomfortable. Sarah parted the crowd in the lobby like Moses did with the Red Sea. People were just awed by her presence. I just enjoyed having her on my arm. I smiled at the host and held out a closed hand. He slipped me $5 and some dough-changed hands. He piped what I had slipped him and asked, "How can I help you, sir?" I replied, "We would like to sit next to Raymond Miles." "Is that a problem?" He looked very uncomfortable. "He is a very good customer, sir. We consider him a friend of the club." I reached into my wallet and pulled out a C-note. I showed it to him and asked, "Would this make any difference?" The G looked awkward for a moment, then stared off into the distance, then took the yard and said, "Follow me." He led us to a table next to the one that I remembered Miles sitting at with Lena last time I was here. The happy couple wasn't at their table, but I got the slant that they were here, maybe romping on the dance floor. The G then said, "A waitress will be by to get you drinks." Then he took a powder. Maybe he knew there was going to be fireworks soon and he wanted to get somewhere safer than here. The John Kirby Sextet with Maxine Sullivan as the torture was entertaining at the Onyx Club. They retired to applause, and then I saw Miles. He was leading Lena back from the dance floor, and she didn't look too steady. She was really turning into a booze hound. She spotted me and stopped like she had seen a ghost. I just smiled at her and waved her over. Lena slowly began to move her dogs again, and Miles pushed her towards their table. He caught the pipe on Samantha just before they sat at their table. "Raymond, so good to see you again. I never did get to say goodbye the last time we were together. I don't know your friend. Why don't you introduce us?" I could see Miles getting steamed. We were playing on his territory, and he was not getting juicy tonight. "No need for introduction, sweetie. This is my former girl and fiancée, Lena Stratton, of the Park Avenue Stratton. Lena, this is Samantha Goldman. Your boyfriend could tell you how he knows her, but he won't because she is just a Jew he tried to kill." I was really on a roll and didn't see Miles motion to somebody. The first time I felt something was not Jake was when I felt a gat jammed into my back. The cold steel of the rod pressing into my back must have been written all over my face. Miles smiled smugly, like he'd just won every bet he'd ever made. His voice was still rough as he said, "Thanks for stopping by. It was good seeing you for the last time. It's been a ride, with all the chaos and heat, but it's time for you to go." He nodded toward his men. "They'll show you the way out." The two muscle-bound goons flanked me. I wondered if they had any clue who they were really working for. I said, "Hey fellas, maybe we can talk this OU," but I was cut off by a hard jab to the back and a sharp voice. "Jeff, shut your trap." I was about to tell him my name was Simon, not Jeff, but figured now wasn't the best time. They marched us across the dance floor to a door at the rear. Once it closed behind us, the room fell eerily silent. "Drop the hardware," growled the one still jabbing me in the back. The other turned to Samantha and said, "You too. I know you're carrying. Or do I have to tear through that nice outfit to find it?" Samantha calmly lifted her left arm, unclipped the small pistol hidden beneath it, and dropped it into his waiting hand. "Nice piece," the thug muttered. "Would have been ashamed to sneeze this one off by accident." They herded us to a door in the back. I could feel the cold breeze from under the door. The first punk said, "Go on out, Snatcher. Mr. Blue wants ta jaw at ya." They led us out into an alley. The wind pierced me through to my soul. The wind brought a feeling of doom. Boy, the things having a Roscoe stuck in your back will do. I needed to get a hold of myself. Our journey now took us out of the bitter wind and into another building. We were led down some corridors and up some stairs. Finally, we were dumped into a room and forced on our hands and knees. A disembodied voice came out of the shadows from above us. "I hear that you have been putting the screws on Mr. Miles. He is a very good customer of mine and has asked me to do a little favor for him. I am going to rub you both out for him. Let's call it a bonus for a heavy customer." Then he laughed in a low, booming, menacing tone that echoed through the room. Samantha let out a low moan when she heard of the future planned for us. What followed was a furtive, whispered argument. Finally, an oil lamp was brought to illuminate us captives. The light seemed to shine on Samantha more than me. Not that I blamed them. She was a real looker. "Mr. Miles and my boys have failed to tell me what a fine dinner you are, Miss Goldman. It would be a shame to nix out a fine Ofri queen like you. If you come onto the tab and thrill me, you don't have to join your Mr. Charlie. It's not like he's your main on the hitch. Don't go V8 on me." Samantha just shook her pretty head and replied, "Thanks, but no thanks. I think I'll stick with my man. I may not live as long, but I'll be happier. The lady has spoken. Bring their ride, and take them just north of Sugar Hill. You know the rest." And to us he said, "Glad to have met you. Sorry it worked out sad. See you in Beluthahatchee." We were then hustled out to my tin can. They put Samantha in the back between them and told me to drive. The first punk said, "Jeff, you just don't get foxy on me, or I'll whip it to the red. Just drive where I tell you." Samantha was trying to get over on them, because she snuggled in between them and said, "Don't you worry, Jeff will be a good boy. Won't you, Jeff?" I just growled as I put the car in gear, turned the radio on, and drove north. I knew Samantha was just trying to catch them off guard, but letting them paw her was making me wacky. Looking at the action in the rearview mirror was apparently affecting my driving, and the two punks were busy with Samantha. I had just left Harlem, headed north on Lenox Avenue. I saw a flashing blue light and heard a siren. I looked in the mirror at the head punk. He told me to pull over and keep the chin clean. Don't call copper. I pulled over and shut the car off. A bright light shone through the car's back window. It settled on each of us in turn. I heard a muffled "shit tain't natural" coming from the police motorcycle. A pair of leather boots marched up to the side of the car with a stocky motorcycle cop in them. I knew how I was going to play this. The bull's slip had shown me the way. I caught Samantha's eye in the mirror, and I gave her a little wink. The copper just stood there for a few moments. The hoods were trying to look as innocent as possible. I stuck a butt in my mouth and lit it. He finally blinked and said, "What's going on here?" I turned to look at him and blew the smoke in his face. Was I speeding, Ossifer? I know I must have weaved a bit, but the way that babe was all over her boyfriends, I just had to watch. You know what I mean, right? Something about a white chick with two darky studs. I smiled crookedly at him and winked. Samantha saw what I was doing and kissed one of the punks on the cheek. I swear he turned white right then. He was not put off. He repeated, "What's going on here?" This time his voice was lower, almost a growl. "I was just taking this babe home with her two boyfriends. They just left the Onyx Club. I'm taking her home. You know, like a car service." "Car service, huh? Where's your hack license? Or don't you have one?" "You caught me, G. What's the damages? Is it just a ducat?" "It can't be worse than that." I looked at the two punks out of the corner of my eye. The second punk was looking very nervous. I needed to get Samantha out of the back seat. I raised my hands up like I was surrendering. "I give up, G." The motorcycle copper had enough. He was thinking that he would run them all in. He knew that he was really close to Harlem and all alone. He backed towards his cycle saying, "Stay right there. I have to call in and then I can get you on your way." I saw that the punks were looking more relaxed. Good. We don't need them spraying lead everywhere, which is what will happen if they get too nervous. While the officer was on the radio, I tried to reassure the others. "See, I didn't turn you in. How about we just call it quits? We won't come back here anymore. You can tell Mr. Blue that you handled things." The officer is still talking. "You can leave now, but once more officers arrive, you're stuck, and you've both got weapons." The others looked uneasy, glancing at each other. Finally, the leader spoke. "No trouble? You're really going to stay away for good? No coming back? Is that the deal?" I nodded. They looked at the officer and quickly slipped out of the car and into an alley. A squad car pulled up, and the officer on the motorcycle walked back to the car. He noticed the two had left and asked Samantha, "Where are your two friends?" Samantha calmly turned to him and replied, "Friends? I only have one, and he's right here." She tucked her arm into mine, and we shared a brief hug. The officer stuttered, and the others in the squad car just started laughing. One of the officers got out and walked over to us. "Hostage situation? Harry, this doesn't look like one," he said with a chuckle. He then quietly added, "Why don't you two get going? I don't think Harry's too happy right now." We didn't need to be told twice. We drove back to my place for some coffee. We needed it. Oh, and we definitely stayed clear of Harlem. It was cold in the car without our coats. I parked the car in the alley next to Mrs. O'Grady's house. Samantha and I hurried to get into the house. The wind tore through us, especially Samantha. That dress did not cover her much at all. I let us in with my key Mrs. O'Grady had given me for the front door just in case. I ushered Samantha into the warmth of the house. She was violently shivering. I didn't know if it was from the cold or from being taken for a ride. Mrs. O'Grady fussed over Samantha, then poured us some coffee. I caught Mama's eye and asked for the hooch. I poured a slug into each of the coffees. We could sure use it after tonight. Mrs. O'Grady saw that Samantha was upset, so she held her hand and talked softly to her. Samantha trembled as I told Mrs. O what had almost happened to us. She tut-tutted over our story. Samantha had finished her coffee and lay her head down on her crossed arms. The night had really taken its toll on her. "Take her up to the empty bedroom." I gave her an unbelieving look. She hastened to explain herself. "I know I only take gentlemen boarders, but she has had a terrible evening." I carried Samantha upstairs and laid her on the bed. Mrs. O'Grady shooed me out of the room, and I went to my bed. I needed to bunk. A scream awoke me from a sound sleep the next morning. I threw on my robe and hurried down the stairs. The Western Union man, actually a teenage boy, had Mrs. O'Grady passed out in his arms. She was holding on to an open telegram. I took her from his arms, thanked him, and laid her on the couch. The poor boy was so flustered, he forgot his tip. I was patting Mama O'Grady's hand when Samantha came down the stairs. She had an old robe over her slip and was a pip. She took over with Mrs. O'Grady and sent me into the kitchen for coffee. By the time I had returned with the coffee, Mama O was sitting up and was softly sobbing on Samantha's shoulder. I set the cups down on the coffee table, and Samantha handed me the telegram. It read, "We regret to announce that T. O'Grady was killed in action on 27th day of February 1937, while serving with the Abraham Lincoln Battalion of the 15th International Brigade at Jarama, Spain. His loss is mourned by all heroic anti-fascist fighters serving with the international brigades in Spain." I was saddened by reading this. Mrs. O'Grady's husband and other two sons were out west working on the Boulder Dam project. They had been there since '33 and were kept on to maintain the dam. She really missed them, and Tom's death had magnified her loneliness. Samantha had to phone in and report what had happened last night. I took over watching Mrs. O'Grady, and Samantha went to get dressed and call the FBI. I heard some heated discussion from Samantha, but I didn't try to listen. I knew she would look out for our interests. Wow. I was already saying our, and we had only went on one date, and that had not ended well. I was trying to keep Mrs. O'Grady relaxed, but she wasn't having any of it. "Let me up, Simon Maddox. I have things to do. I can't lie around all day like some people." I knew she meant me by her sniff of derision. She bustled off into the kitchen, just as Samantha was coming out. "I know it's late, but I'll have your breakfast done in a jiffy." If working was what she needed to get through Tom's dying, I was going to help her any way I could. It was along those lines that I asked Mrs. O if she had done my laundry yet. I am dedicated to helping in any which way I can. I got a sock from Samantha for that question. Hey, I was just trying to help. After she socked me, Samantha told me what her bosses had said. "They were not happy that you almost got us killed last night." At the irate look of my kisser, she said, "Their words, not mine." As a result, we have been assigned to the Hoover Dam as part of the security team. Basically, we will look at ways to make protecting the dam easier, and we'll let the spotlight on us dim a bit. I muttered some choice words ending with bunk, but we were told to go or be arrested. What about Mrs. O'Grady? I don't want to leave her all alone here, especially in her state. She just lost one of her sons, and her husband and other sons are all out west. Wait a minute. They worked on the Boulder Dam and are still in Boulder City, keeping the dam in good working order. That's the area we will be going to. I winked at her. Do you think we can get her to go with us? I don't know. Say as an important witness? Samantha said she didn't know, but to let her work on it. Later that day, we were all in the air heading for Las Vegas, Nevada. It was April before the FBI had decided it was safe for Sarah and I to return. I breathed a sign of relief when I heard that. I was going goofy with boredom. Mrs. O'Grady had a good time visiting with her family. Mrs. Brock was looking after the house and cooking for Charlie and Joe. Mama O'Grady flew back with us, satisfied with seeing her family and receiving a promise that they will visit for Christmas. We were flying back on April 1st, April Fool's Day. I hope that was not an omen. We were just listening to the radio before we drove to the airport. Following planned events previously scheduled, the United Kingdom recognized the colony of Aden in southern Arabia. The country of India was granted provincial autonomy under a new constitution. We flew into New York in the evening and took a hack to Mrs. O'Grady's house. Everyone was happy to see us back. Charlie was amazed that we actually left the ground by our own choice. Tomorrow we were going to be briefed by the FBI on what had happened while we were gone and plans for the future. After sleeping at Mrs. O'Grady's for the first time since March, we had breakfast. When I say we, I mean Samantha too. Mrs. O has become very attached to Samantha and is having her sleep in the house. Of course, she told me that no hanky-panky is allowed and she thinks of Samantha as a daughter. I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid, so I didn't bring up the fact that if she treated me like a son and Samantha like a daughter, then how could Samantha be my girlfriend? Surprisingly, the G-men wanted the meeting to be in my office. When I reminded them the size of my office, they told me to rent another, larger space in the building and that the FBI would pay the rent. I called the G that owned the building and he was overjoyed. He told me to meet the superintendent at 8 o'clock a.m. and he would show me the rooms. Rooms, I couldn't afford that. Oh yeah, the G-men were picking up the tab. I pulled up in front of the building with Samantha in the car. The building super was parked on the stoop of the building smiling. If anything, Mr. Guthrie, the building superintendent, smiled even bigger. He directed me to a parking place around the building and told me that was where I would be parking my tin can. He quickly rushed over the additional cost for the private parking spot, and I didn't point out that it was the city's alley. The rooms he had for me were one floor up, on the 4th floor. He said the view was better, and it was 3 large rooms. I pointed out that the building next door blocked any view, and he pointed out that I could watch my car in the alley, so no punks did anything to it. The furnishings were included, for a nominal additional fee, and I could move right in. I was trying to get the place ready for the meeting, when I noticed him still hanging around. When I asked him why, he said he was waiting for the deposit. Not wanting to gross about it, I gave him my last Benjamin. He accepted it graciously and turned to go. He then turned around again and asked when I was vacating the other office. I heard him mumbling about double rents, and I went right down to move my radio and things in my desk. He followed me and told me I could leave the desk right there. I remember buying that desk when I moved in, but didn't want to argue. I gave him the key to that old broom closet and asked him to send the gentlemen in new suits up to my new office when they came. He said that he would send the G-men up as soon as they arrived, and that I had reminded him that the office needed its lock fixed, and that he would get right on it. I climbed the stairs to my new office and thought how my life had changed since I took the lay from Miss Sykes. Samantha had arranged the office, so I had an entry office, my office, with a fine desk and a meeting catch-all room. I put the radio in the office and noticed that she had an electric coffee pot and was making coffee. She had even come up with some clean cups. I wondered how she made it look so easy and knew that I'd found my Mrs. Maddox and a new partner when she left the FBI. Soon after the coffee was done, 3 G-men showed up. 2 of them had seen my old office and were much impressed with my new rooms and the hot coffee. The 5 of us sat around a table going over what had been done while we were gone. Mr. Miles' new hideout still hadn't been found. Not a lot had happened at Camp Siegfried since March was still very cold, and there were not a lot of visitors to the camp. Now that April was here, with the warmer weather, things were expected to speed up. The Bund ran a rattler from Flatbush Avenue out to Camp Siegfried on the Long Island Railroad. It ran every Sunday. The Bund advertised it as a place for German Americans to get out of the city and relax in a pastoral setting. What they were not told was the anti-Semitic, anti-communist, and anti-union rhetoric that was taught there. The Bund also purchased 11 acres across the lake. The house and tents were used for housing the German, American youth. The youth were divided into several age groups of both males and females that were segregated by sex and age. The regimen they are taught includes education in pro-Nazi doctrine to ensure a new generation having the pure Aryan philosophy. There is already a team of volunteers collecting the license plate numbers of people who drive to the camp on Sundays. They are sent to the United States Marshal for that area, and he sends them to us. The problem we have is identifying those who take the train. As for Mr. Blue, other agents are assigned to investigate his criminal activities. As you can expect, getting agents or stool pigeons close to his organization is hard to do. We feel that his supplying arms to Miles is a very small part of his illegal operations. Getting Red to buy this Joe College G-man was boring me. I was also getting angry because he hadn't said much about Miles yet. He was the crumb I wanted to get. He had tried to bot me 3 times, and that was 3 too many. He had also tried to rub out Samantha, and that just made me evil. I was gunning for Miles. The G-man continued, Miles has not been seen around the Onyx Club since you 2 confronted him. He has basically gone underground. His Maulina Cartwright has not been seen lately either. We really need to get our blinkers on him. I would say that's the most important job that needs to be done. Are you up to it? I looked at Samantha, and she was nodding yes. Yes, we'll get on it right away. Agent Goldman will keep you informed of our progress. Basically, we'll tell you when that part of the lay is done. I'm a little light on dough right now, having to rent this new office. He didn't let me finish. He just pulled a wad of lettuce out of his briefcase and tossed it on the table before they left. Boy, I love working for Uncle Sam. The weather was nicer, so I thought we would leave the office early and take a ride through town in my Auburn. We were cruising up Fifth Avenue enjoying the fresh spring air. I thought a special treat was needed, and we stopped at the Empire State Building. Samantha told me it was a wonderful idea, and we took the express elevator to the observation deck on the 86th floor. We were enjoying the brisk breeze that had made dirigible docking on the 102nd floor impractical and the views from the observation decks. We were enjoying sights like the George Washington Bridge over the Hudson River, the surrounding countryside of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. Today was so clear you could almost see to Massachusetts. The idyllic calm of the observation deck was broken by a scream and a hand pointing up above where two figures hanging out of a window near the mooring mast struggled for supremacy, a supremacy that would decide between life and death. One man was larger than the other, and he had the advantage. He propelled the smaller man out of the window where he clutched for life on the T of a mooring mast. The large man drew a heater from under his arm and pointed it at the smaller man. I thought I made the big guy. I shouted Miles. He looked down at me with a sneer of contempt and coldly shot the man. Samantha and I had to dodge out of the way as the man fell lifeless to the observation deck. Miles disappeared into the building, and I lost sight of him. Samantha and I rushed for the stairs hoping to cut off Miles before he could escape. We didn't pass anyone on the stairs, and were soon looking down at the broken body from the open window. A quick search grabbed the special elevator that ran from the 102nd floor to the 86th floor. We took it down and found the bulls already there. We spent several minutes being given the third by New York's finest. It turns out the stiff was Lester Swartz, a G who jumbled numbers. Samantha and I took the express elevator down and asked to see the building manager. Samantha flashed her FBI buzzer, and everyone was eager to help us. It seemed that Miles had an office on the 88th floor and had enough moxie to register the office under his own moniker. The fact that Samantha were with the FBI, got us the key to Mr. Miles' office. We took the regular elevator to the 88th floor. There weren't many plugs using this elevator, so went there pretty quick. I guess what they say about this being the empty state building was true. The elevator boy seemed happy to have the business, and I tipped him 2 bits. It was like I had made a friend for life. The door to Miles' office was wide open, which was Jake for us, because he had changed the lock. That was a big goof on his part, and he probably would not get his lease renewed. Samantha and I took it apart looking for anything to pin on Miles. His books and records were not so surprisingly missing, but we got the slant that Swartz was a bookkeeper. Hey, even Al Capone needed someone to jumble the numbers, so I shouldn't be so surprised that Miles needed one. It seems the master race was not above using so-called inferior plugs for their skills. We dropped the twister off with the building manager and told him that Miles had changed the lock. Needless to say, he was not happy about that. Our travels led us back to my car, which has a parking ducat on it. I was not happy either. We arrived back at Mrs. O'Grady's in time to hear the Lone Ranger on the ether. Deputy Sawyer had made me into a hophead for his show. Saturday, Mrs. O'Grady put the screws on me to get her yard ready for spring. I liked it. It was honest work and no G was rubbed out, burnt, or had to go to the hospital. Sunday was pleasant, enjoying Mama O'Grady's special Irish boiled dinner of beef brisket, leeks, carrots, and potatoes. Sunday evening, I cuddled up to Samantha while we listened to the press radio news, where we heard the British Admiralty today denied the existence of pirate submarines off the coast of Spain. Captain Jules of the destroyer HMS May was quoted as saying, "We have not had any run-ins with the so-called pirate submarines. Since we have not seen these submarines, we cannot tell their country of origin, for example Germany or Italy." The German and Italian embassies were quick to deny that they had naval units operating off the coast of Spain. After that, we listened to selections from a string orchestra and went to sleep in our own beds. Monday morning started with the usual breakfast of oatmeal, day-old sweet bread, and coffee. Joe and Charlie made comments that breakfast was more enjoyable with the addition to the house of Miss Goldman. Samantha blushed, endearing her even more to the male boarders of the house. Samantha and I were late getting to our office. Note I said our, because we had stopped by the phone company to get telephone service to the office. I figured since the G-men were paying for it, we should line it up. Unfortunately, the government doesn't have any more pull with Ma Belle than the average citizen does. It was a humbled Miss Goldman and I that left the telephone company. We arrived at the building just in time to wait for a garbage wagon that had temporarily taken over my parking spot in the alley. Samantha started the coffee while I perused the blat. We had to decide on what we would do from here. Reading Little Orphan Annie reminded me I needed to get on the blower. I had just reached the 3rd floor when Mr. Guthrie ran past me on his way to answer the horn. I distinctly remember hearing him say, "Mr. Maddox, yes?" Then my world went red and black as the box under the pay phone exploded. I was getting tired of waking up in hospitals. This time I had Samantha sitting beside me and my 3 favorite G-men frowning at me, like I had anything to do with a bomb going off. The nurse let me know that I was okay. They had a bed reserved for me just in case. Great. Now I had the hospital plugs laughing at my expense. The Joe College G-man started with putting the screws on me. "Mr. Maddox, we had thought that having you in our corner would slow down the violence in this case. We were wrong. I could have wised them up on that score. As a result, and with the death of Mr. Guthrie, we are going to have to take drastic action." Basically, Mr. Guthrie was not the only person to kick off in that explosion. "You were also a casualty, Mr. Maddox. The front page of every blat will say that. We will set you up in a new life. You will be safe and Mr. Miles can relax." I could cotton to that. Maybe they would put me up in the Waldorf Astoria. Okay, I'm your man, just arrange it, and I'll be happy to sit out a little while. My only question is, who is going to tell Mrs. O'Grady and my friends the bad news? They had everything doped out. Miss Goldman will tell them. She will also continue to stay at Mrs. O'Grady's boarding house. As a matter of fact, you should get going right now. Samantha kissed me and then left. I was ready to check into the hotel and was on top of the world. That was soon to change. The G-men took my clothes and emptied my pockets. Then they folded up my clothes and put them in a bag. I started to say something, but Joe College cut me off. "These clothes are not suitable for where you are going to stay." I was acting like a real Okie, nodding and smiling. That was until he pulled some rags out of another bag and threw them to me. Those clothes were dirty and infested. The nurse got real upset when some of the bugs flew onto her clean hospital bed. "Put those on and these too." He threw some old work boots in front of me. "Those rags will not make anyone wiser in the Bowery flop we are going to stash you in. Somebody was going to pay for this, I tell you." Blast. They had given me 2 left shoes. I got dressed, and they led me out of the back of the hospital. A garbage wagon, my new mode of transportation, was waiting patiently there. The G-men gave the old man driving it a Lincoln for his time and bundled me in with the garbage. The wagon was ready to go when Joe College said to me, "Oh, Mr. O'Toole, don't forget your money. The FBI will spare no expense making sure that you are safely hidden away." I held out my hand, and he dropped 2 bits into it, 1 nickel and 20 pennies. The agents drove off, and I was hauled to my new joint. Yes, somebody is really going to pay for this. Dear listeners, next part of this story will be published soon. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.